I am so delighted to share with you my favorite hacks, lots of insights. I'm hoping to leave you feeling a lot more inspired and equipped to build better business cases after today. So to introduce myself for anybody that hasn't met me yet, I'm your host today. I'm Sally Pritchett. I'm CEO of Something Big, creative communications agency that's trying to make the world better by making workplaces fairer, healthier and happier for everyone through communication and better conversations with our employees. I'm a comms expert with about 35 years to my name, which makes me a veteran of communications, which basically means old. But I have heaps of experience in this field. So I'm really hoping specifically today to talk to you about how to build better business cases. The first thing I'm going to get you to think of is I'm going to ask you to stop and think about a particular budget that you are trying to build a business case for. Now think about what that's about. Maybe it's about well-being. Maybe it's about a diversity and inclusion program that you want. Maybe it's a new tool you want to buy, whatever it is. Now think today about what would happen if you didn't get that budget, and then think about the worst case scenario that you never get to do that wonderful work that you're talking about or hoping to do. And what would happen if a journalist, a very evil journalist, came along and they got an inside scoop and they took your brand name and they went, brand company X is under scrutiny for poor, what is it? Health and safety, well-being, poor communication, poor investment in their culture, and they've created a new industry low for XYZ following a failure to invest in. Try filling that in just for a moment. I'm going to pause for a minute. Write that headline for me. You don't have to share it in the comments. You're welcome to if you want to. You don't have to. But just think about the worst case scenario. And as you're thinking about that, let me just add to the risk. Generation Z are struggling in our workplaces to get the instant gratification sometimes that they want and demand from being able to have an employee voice in our organizations. A once a year employee opinion survey is not cutting it for them, especially when they don't get instant feedback back again or see action. So one of the things that they're doing is they're publishing your culture, whether you know it or not, out in the world of social media. There are plenty of hashtags out there, Act Your Wage, Bare Minimum Monday. There are all sorts of hashtags where huge volumes of young people are having conversations about the world of work, but they're having it externally. So it might not even be a journalist who's going to publish this. It might be your staff who are going to publish this. If we think of an example recently of a brand who hit the headlines, it was M&S. M&S have had the most crucifying year with their cyber attack that they've had in the UK, and it's been really hard for them. And they've decided to open on Boxing Day this year because I'm pretty sure they need some extra pennies in those coffers. But this has meant breaking a perk that has been in that business for many years, which is to get Boxing Day off. And they've ended up in the media. Now, they may well have been doing everything possible to protect that, but they have ended up in the media. So whether we're on the front page of the newspaper or not, let's just now stop and think about our funding and our budget cases, that we are doing something that is going to manage the reputation of our brand through doing the right thing, looking after our people, investing in whatever it might be that you're trying to work on. But what is the state of funding in HR and internal comms? And the reason that you're all on this call today is that you all work in people and culture. You all work in HR and internal comms. and it's underfunded. It is. So we're getting in HR about 0.74% of the revenue spend, and that's what's being spent on average in HR. But if we look underneath that, in finance, in IT, in sales, in marketing, yeah, whoever just put that little emoji up, I can see. Yeah, it's shocking because we are not funded as much as some of these other departments and silos. And yet, without our people, we don't have businesses. Without our people, we don't deliver great customer service. Without our people, we don't deliver for the business. So in reality, that budget should be higher. But now if we look at these other stats, whether it's HR or whether it's internal comms, we have got leaders like yourselves saying we don't know how to demonstrate and prove ROI for our work. And there's an awful lot of talk about culture, people. It's all very vague, it's blurry, it's fluffy, it's the colouring in department, it's intangible. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I think what we do is really tangible. And I'm going to share with you later on some resources where we've put a whole load of funding arguments together, but I'm also going to take you through some hacks in terms of how we do that. But let's just pause on that slide for a moment. We are underfunded, and yet the work we do is critical. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put you in the shoes of your board. Think of your senior leaders. That could be your bosses, that could be the board of directors. It depends where you sit in the organization. But let's put you in the position of the people who are making the decisions. Now, this is the first moment where I need to actually just get you to put your sandwiches down for a moment and get ready to type, because you're going to have a speedy set of polls in the chat function. So at the ready, I think Charlie has to put something in a poll in the chat. So look at the screen, but also look at your chat. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and you're only going to have 10 seconds to answer each question, okay? 10 seconds is not very long. So get those fingers ready. Okay, my first question is, a teenager wants to go to a party tonight, and their friend has a BMW, it's brand new, and they're going to give them a lift. So are we going to let them go? Yes or no? That's your only options. Okay, second question. We're about 50-50 on this, maybe some of you don't have teenagers and know what they could be at. So all sorts of things could be happening at that party. What kind of party is it? Okay, our second question. The teenager is actually 18. And it's a friend's party, and it's an 18th birthday party, and it's at a house. And now you've got an extra option: yes, no, or yes, but with conditions. Yeah. Okay. We've got some conditions. It's just occurred to you that you didn't know how old the teenager was. They could have been 13. Okay. And our third question, we've got a bit more information. That same teenager is 18. It's the same party, but actually now we know the friend. We know their parents. There are some rules, some limits, and there's a way to check in. And we have another option as well. Yes, with conditions, and yes, with our blessing. So what do you vote this time? Okay, so we've actually got some yes with blessings now. Okay, I'm going to stop you there with those 3 questions, because there was some flaws with all 3 of those things. First of all, the reason for the time limit I'm coming on to, because this is the amount of decisions we're asking our decision makers to make, and they don't have much time to make it. But when I asked you the first time, that first question, The thing is, I gave you some irrelevant information. I don't care whether they've got a new BMW. You didn't tell me whether the actual friend was going to drive or the parents of that friend were going to drive. And really, the BMW was the least of my worries. What you didn't tell me is whether that teenager was 13 or 19. And that's really quite a big difference, okay, when we're sending them to a party. But the thing is, I do have teenagers. And the thing about teenagers is those parties come with risk. There's alcohol, there's drugs, we don't know where it is. In my neighborhood, there's been stabbings, there's all sorts of risk. So what you gave me in that first incident was some irrelevant information, some missing information, and way too much risk. And my answer as a parent would have been no chance. Okay, because you didn't even tell me how old this kid was. Okay, when it came to B section, the second time I asked you, you reduced the risk for me by filling me in a bit more, but you still made me beg a few questions about this party because house parties can get pretty out of hand. So you gave me the option to give you conditions. So I sort of want to say yes, because I kind of go, okay, they're 18. I want to say yes, but you know what? I'm going to put some conditions. And that's what also happens with budget responses when we put them through to the board. They come back with a yes, but, or a yes, and, because you've given me that middle ground. Okay. When we got to the third option, you've reduced that risk. So what you've given me the option now to do is to give you my blessing, because you've given me all the guardrails. There's limits, there's a way to check in. I know a bit more information. You've massively reduced the risk for me, and you've given me all the guardrails. Now let's just pause and think about that whole episode in terms of the board. The most I can tell you about board decisions. Let me just give you an eye and a view into the boardroom for a minute. The agenda of a boardroom is packed. Okay, it's always impossible to get through everything on the agenda, and something normally drops off, or we didn't get time for it, or it just wasn't the biggest priority. We overrun on something and we didn't get to the next bit. The second thing I can tell you about boards is we talk a lot about risk because there's so much of it. And so that party scenario is important because we're thinking about the drugs, the alcohol. Oh my goodness, who's going to this party? Do the parents know? There's far too many questions and there's far too much risk. There's lots of demands for decisions. So those decisions are like little bombs. They could blow up at me, and they could be career defining, actually. So if I'm a board member and there's all this information and you're asking me to make all these decisions, the challenge I have is, hang on a minute, I would rather sort of defer, yes, but with conditions, or no, not now, maybe later. I would rather defer those decisions than to be put on the spot when I don't feel like I'm fully informed. The next thing I can tell you is there's all sorts of curveballs coming from the outside world. I could think back to M&S this year. They've had a massive curveball with their cyber security issues. And, so there's all sorts of risk that's coming from the outside world, but they're throwing in these curveballs that you need to talk about within the board as well. And that adds to it. On top of that, we've got all these different stakeholders and they've got conflicting needs. What do my employees need? What do the unions need? What do the customers need? What does the IT department need? What does all this information that's coming from all directions, let alone the investors and shareholders? So there's just loads of who do I make happy? I love the phrase, let's do the right thing. Well, by who? The right thing by employees might not be the right thing by shareholders. Who knows? It's just conflict of interests here. And then the other thing I think I see is so much information goes into the board. You might find that in your organizations, you have to forward board packs together, or there'll be what we call pre-work, which is all the pre-reading that board members do before they get into that board meeting. And sometimes, guess what? They haven't done that pre-reading. So then they're getting up to speed really quickly. But yeah, there's a lot of information. Sometimes there's a lot of data. Sometimes there's missing information. Sometimes there's irrelevant information. And it becomes really difficult. And sometimes there's loads of choice as well. We think we've tried to help, so we've given them loads of choice, and they're just there trying to work out what is the actual decision I need to make right now. I don't want you to feel massively, massively sorry for the board, but I do want us to have that eye on why we get the objections that we get. Because I don't think that decision makers are trying to be difficult. I don't think they're trying to turn everything down that you ask for, but I do think that they are overloaded with information and requests, and what happens is they get put in an impossible position. And imagine that if we look back at the voting in the chat, there's a mixture of answers. Yes, no. You know, when I asked that first question, some people were like, let them go to the party. Yeah. And they threw caution to the wind. They didn't really think through what the risk might be. Maybe this is a 13-year-old going to a party with drugs and alcohol. It's okay. But what you get is you get this mixture of answers in the boardroom. Some say yes, some say no. Somebody comes along and goes, I don't think that that's the right thing. And so what you tend to get coming out of that decision-making meeting is a lot of maybes and mixed reactions. You don't get this instant win. So what are some of the common objections that we see? Okay, I'm going to give you four areas of what these common objections are. So when you get those maybes or you get the no's, some of these might be familiar, but I'm also going to ask you to take to the chat and put in your own words the kind of responses you get when you don't win your budget, because then I can work with some of those answers in a minute as well when we go to questions. But yeah, these are four areas that I think that boards reject business cases. Obviously, the first one is money, it's commercial, but it's things like you didn't prove the ROI, the payback was too long. The upfront costs of this, the investment before I get anything back is too high. Maybe there are just other projects where I can spend that money and get my return on investment a bit quicker. Or maybe we just don't have the money right now. And I would actually be really saying to you, yes, but the problem is I don't have the budget. And what you hear is no, but actually what you really should be hearing is yes, but we don't have the budget. And so we can frame that in a minute. So there's money issues, right? They're all coming under the commercial one. The second one I think that we see is the sort of delivery one, which is this all sounds really great on paper, but I'm not convinced. I either doubt that you can actually do that, and you've showed me this fantastic return on investment that you're promising me, but I don't actually know that I believe that you can deliver that. Or maybe this just feels a bit too complicated. You've given me a solution here and you've, penned out this whole thing, but it just feels really hard. And I just don't know if we've got the effort and sort of thing for that right now. Or maybe you haven't given me a proof of concept. You haven't showed me how this can work. Or the other thing is that maybe that I do believe your delivery. I do believe you can do this, but there's just a lot of other stuff going on in the business right now as well. So you could deliver this, but I don't think you could deliver it right now because there's too many other things going on. So I trust you, but there's all this other stuff going on. Or maybe I trust you, but I feel like, yes, but we can't do that until we've done these other things. We have to create the conditions that are ready for you to be able to do whatever it is you're trying to do. So if it were well-being, it might be, yeah, that sounds lovely, but we got to fix some of these things over here first. So delivery is that second thing. I'm not arguing with you about this is the right thing to do, but I don't know whether this is that you can deliver it. The third area I see is the purpose. It's like I'm questioning why. So that feels like, oh, well, this feels like a nice to have. I think you probably could deliver that. Maybe we even do have the money for it, but I just feel like it's a bit of a nice to have. I feel like that's the cherry on the cake. Yeah, we're not ready for this in the business is one of the things that people just put in the post. Yeah, so under purpose, it's like the why. You know, this feels like a nice to have. I don't really believe that this is the right solution. I agree with we should invest in this. I agree with the problem that you've outlined. I don't agree this is the solution. Um, and the other way of looking at this why as well is sometimes it's like, yeah, but is that problem a big enough one for us to solve? Is it worth solving? Can we solve it? I'm not sure I'm convinced on the purpose of this. And what's the real value to our business of solving this? So the why, the purpose, is the third bucket of objections I see. And the fourth one, I'm going to call it sort of strategic rationale, because I feel like, where's the data to back this up? How does this move us towards us delivering our strategy? How is this going to make me look good? I'm the CEO. I'm not really sure whether you delivering this is going to make me look better than I do today. So I don't really see the point. I'm here to deliver on my job. Yeah, I know. You can laugh, whoever that was, but that's what we're really dealing with here. So is it worth my while? Because if there's a risk in investing in this and I give you money that I don't give to someone else, then it needs to make something in my business change for the better, make me look good, make the board look good, make everyone go, yeah, you made the right call. Those are the main areas that I see for objecting to budgets. Okay, I want to get on to solutions because we're already 25 minutes in. Okay, here are my 6 best hacks. Okay, so knuckle up. The first one is the no decision. This is kind of like that they feel a bit meh about doing whatever it is that you've asked them to do, and you haven't given them excitement. And I've got a little visual here because I think we are looking at our business cases in the wrong way. So when it comes to people and culture, the most typical business case I see is predicated at the top of this bucket. And this bucket is full of either profit that exists or potential profit. And so this discretionary effort that we think we're going to sell a dream of, if we do this, if we invest in our people and culture, we will get more discretionary effort, commitment, loyalty, whatever you want to describe it as. And it's sort of like we're selling a dream at the top of this bucket. And it's like as if we're telling the board, you're going to get this additional thing that you don't have now. I'm a bit cynical, and I absolutely believe in people and culture, right? And I believe that that discretionary effort comes when we get our people on our side. But as a board director and a CEO, I can be a bit cynical because my resources are limited and my priorities are spread very thin. And so if you are going to tell me this is a nice to have, it's like this is what we're going to have additional, I'm like, maybe, but I've got time to wait for that because that could come tomorrow, it could come another day. If you look down my bucket, the next thing we tend to promise is better productivity. So if our people are more committed, they're better, they're more engaged, they will be more productive. And again, we're selling a dream of something that hasn't necessarily happened yet. And that's fine, because I do agree that productivity is an absolutely tangible thing that every one of your businesses cares about. So yes, it is a good part of the business case. However, again, you're hoping to give me something additional. Where I think we overlook the opportunity in our business cases is in loss aversion, because actually we are psychologically programmed as human beings to hate, to lose the things that we already have. I'm actually just looking for a piece of information on this, which I wrote down earlier. But we work twice as hard to avoid losing something than we will to gain something new. And we have an inbuilt status quo, which means that we prefer to keep things the same, even if that's harder. So if our car is breaking down, we will go, I'd rather know the better the devil you know. I'll keep my car, even if it keeps letting me down, rather than buy a new one, because that feels like a whole new thing. So I might spend more money maintaining the car I have than buying a new one, or whatever it might be. But we have a predisposed psychological design around loss aversion. So now look at the bottom of my bucket. How much are we already losing out of our bucket of profit that is already costing us? Now, I'm going to give you a minute to think about this in your businesses, because sometimes that could be tribunal costs, that could be health and safety claims, that could be sickness and absence, that could be attrition. There will be maybe more. There will be things like we might have issues with losing customers specifically because of poor customer service, or employees that are not engaged in looking after them. There are lots of ways we are already leaking our profit. Going into our business case with a business case that going into the board with a business case that says we will put a plaster over this leak in this bucket, and that will reduce the amount we're losing in profit. That is a good place to start for the business case, because as a CEO, I'm going, crikey, how much are we losing on that then? How much are our health and safety claims costing, or our tribunal costs, or whatever it might be? So I guess at the first hack is make sure you're focused on the right part of the bucket. What are we already losing? And we'll talk about how much we're losing today, and if this continues with a trend, how much we could be losing in the future. Okay, my second sort of element here is to use, again, another psychology. We are going in with too big an ask. What we tend to do is we do bottom up. So what you do is you go off and you go, well, this is the program I want to run, and this is how much it's going to cost. I'm going to have a bit of contingency, and you work out how much money you need to ask for. And then you go into the board with a business case predicated on that top tier of what you want it to look like, because that's what you want. And you're thinking to yourself, I've only got one chance here. I'm only getting this one chance to put this business case across, and therefore I'm going for gold. I'm asking for it. And unfortunately, because I have no comparison, as a board member, I might go, oh, that seems like an awful lot of money. And of course it will, right? Because you only have to go into the supermarket at the moment. Any product you pick up off that shelf is more money than you actually thought it would be. So whatever budget you're going in with is going to feel expensive to the person that you're presenting it to. But if you only give them that choice, then they're just pretty much going, well, that seems really expensive. I think we should look for another way. That feels like we're investing far too much money. I'm going to say no. Okay, think Dragon's Den. I'm out. Okay, but what if I was walking into Tesco's, and apologies for those of you that are dialing in from around the world and might not have Tesco's. This is a very UK-centric sort of concept. But when Tesco's many years ago introduced what they call their value range, blue and white stripy value range, and their finest range, and in the middle of that, they had their sort of branded things. So now I go to look at baked beans or any kind of product, and I'm going, okay, well, I can have baked beans for 50p in the blue and white range. That's okay. Or I could have Heinz baked beans, or I could have these finest baked beans. I don't know if that exists, but here we go. And now I'm suddenly faced with three choices. Now, if I really care about my baked beans, I might go, I think Heinz is right for me. But if I don't care so much, or I just don't have as much money, I might go, do you know what? I think that blue and white range will be fine for me today. So the magic number for you to remember is 3. 3 choices is the proven psychology of choice that we need. So we go in with 3 choices, but we are super clear about the benefits and risks of each of those 3 options. So it may well be that the option you really want them to choose is middle of the range. All right. So you start with that. But what you then show them is you go, okay, but if we had all the money in the world and you wanted all the return on investment in the world, then it could look like this. And I'm going to sell you that dream. Now, a board member will feel pretty cool about themselves when they say, actually, I'm going to say no to the gold option because we're being prudent and we're saving money. So they say no to the gold option because it feels frivolous. And they feel like they've done a favor to the business by saying no to the top option. But in the bottom option, that blue and white value Tesco's baked beans range, we're showing them, look, we could do this internally. We could do it a bit, I don't know if this is a UK thing, I'm going to say now as well. We could do it a bit Blue Peter. We could do it a bit DIY. It's not going to have all the frills, but we have to show them the risk. When we don't invest enough to do it well, we might not get the return on investment because it might not land. So we have to show them the pros and cons of each of those three ranges. And of course, what you're angling for is that middle range to come through and they go, you know what? It sounds like the risk is lowest with the middle one. And also the return on investment is the most likely in that middle option. So you go in with too big an ask. And I'm asking you now to actually add and make a bigger ask, but give them something to say no to. That helps you with that bit about yes, but with conditions, because now the condition is, but we're going for option 2. Okay, hack 3 is about the nice to have misfit. So this is where we just forget to connect this to them looking good, to them delivering on their strategy, to them doing something. This has got to solve a really serious problem in our business. And if we don't make that strategic alignment, then we miss that thing. It feels like it's a nice to have. What we're really looking for here is that if you want to deliver on your strategy, and that means X, Y, and Z have to happen, and our people have to have a culture of X, Y, and Z, then we have to do this piece of work. And if we don't make that connection for people clear enough, then it becomes a nice to have. And we just go, oh, it's so easy to turn this one down if it's not aligned to my strategy. Because I'm like, yeah, that sounds really nice. I believe that you can do it. You might get the ROI, but it's just not important for this year. And that's when you get the response of, yeah, but not now. Okay. This next one is really important to me as well. This is about poor articulation. If you've got young kids and they come to you at Christmas, I want this, I want that. And I was taught as I was growing up, I want doesn't get. But of course, what we do when we put a business case together is we go, I want this money because I want to do this program. Well, the problem with that story is it starts with I want. And what we really need to do is get better at storytelling. Later on, we're going to put something in the chat for you, a resource that I've created, which is a storytelling way and a template, and I've done it in Word, so it's open source for you to be able to tell your business case story in the way that I'm going to recommend. Now, you might have a specific form within your business that you have to complete, but go and try putting your business case through my format, because Andy Raskin, who you can go and look him up, you can ask ChatGPT about him, etc. But he created a kind of format for storytelling that I think is so important. It starts like this. You state a fact, okay? That fact might be that we have, think about the bottom of your bucket leaking. It might be we have X amount of money being spent on tribunals or on health and safety claims or on absenteeism or whatever it is. There is a fact. That is a fact. It's undisputable. You have to start with an undisputable fact. This system is changing, undisputable fact, whatever it is. Okay, you start with a fact because at that point, your board directors are on board because they're like, yeah, that's true. That is the fact. And then you go, okay, now in terms of making that problem, navigating that problem, there are going to be basically winners and losers. There are going to be people, there are businesses that can solve that problem and businesses that don't. And you story tell those two sort of scenarios. You kind of sell the dream of this is what it looks like if we win and we overcome that and we, I don't know, eradicate some of our absenteeism or whatever it might be. And you also tell the story of what happens if you don't deal with it. And you can take my story from the newspaper headline earlier on and your employees publishing your culture externally. You basically describe the dystopia and describe the utopia. And in this moment, you're getting from your board directors, your decision makers, you're getting the flip. The flip is where they decide which of those groups they want to be in. Do they want to be the ones that are heroes in this story, that sell, that solve this problem, or do they want to be on the front page of the newspaper and all over social media? And most of us board members will decide we don't want to be on the front page of the newspaper. And then you build in your solution and your storytelling around what it is you are suggesting. And so this is, instead of a I want, it becomes a I can help you. I can help you with my solution. My solution and running this program and whatever I'm asking for a budget for starts to help you to not be on the front page of the newspaper and to be a winner, a hero, rather than a loser. So get that story straight is my hack 4. Okay, avoiding the no. Yeah, so you saw it earlier on when we did the poll around the teenager, that we could have yes with conditions, we could have yes with blessing, we could have not now, all sorts of things. So what we're really trying to do in that first time that we're putting this forward, and sometimes we don't win the business case the first time, okay? But we want to avoid the no. I just don't want you to get that cul-de-sac dead end. So what we're really trying to do here is frame it as a when, not a whether. And whether, and so a whether is it's going to be a yes, no, and that's end of, and it doesn't get a chance to come back to the board meeting. Or a when is, can I bring this back up in 6 months' time, etc. Now, I forgot to mention that when we did the teenager poll earlier on, that very first time I asked you the question, the party was tonight. So there was an urgency to that decision, and you were not given the time to make an informed decision. And I only gave you 10 seconds anyway. But this is what happens in the board meetings as well, is that we ask the question and we put forward our business cases far too late for when we're asking them to do something. And the real win you want is from a board director to come back and go, actually, we would like to do this thing. We are signing off your budget, but we want you to do it sooner than you have said. And when I say that, it's because you've looked down the chain and you've said, in 6 months' time, in a year's time, or whatever timeline you want to do, there is this problem that is going to go, and I'm going to use one of my favorite words, kaboom. So this is what's happening, and this is what's changing in our business. And if we look down the line, there's a moment where it's going to get really untenable, and we're going to have to deal with this, and it's going to go kaboom. So in order to prevent you from having that problem in the business in the future, we want to reduce that risk and we want to do this thing. If you give them that timeline, you can say, we don't have to do this now. We can do it further down the line, but we wanted to raise this risk with you now so that when in a few months' time we come back to you and tell you how this is going, they say that you can, we can ask you again and you can say, oh yeah, now it's time to do this. Often when we do this tactic, we get the, oh my God, is that what's really going to happen in a few months' time? Well, we better get onto this quicker than I had suggested. So you're not getting a no, you're getting a what about later on? So maybe in your business cases, you can say, there is an option for us to do this now, this year, and it looks like this. There is an option to do it next year. By the way, next year's option might even look more expensive. It might be the problem might have grown, etc., etc. So just think about your timeline is that one. Okay, and my last hack is around understanding your stakeholders. And I've got some little animals on here. Apologies to anyone who is one of these stakeholders, but you're going to fall into some of these categories. So I've come up against various, and I've met various stakeholders in my 30 years, and these are kind of my little animal friends. So the gorilla, don't put any names to these. Okay, so the gorilla is really powerful. They have to make the decision. It has to be them that makes the decision, okay? You can't make a decision for them. They have to feel like they made the decision. And when they make a decision, everyone else in the room knows that they all have to follow suit with that. I could probably say in this moment, if you are watching Traitors, then this is one of your big dogs. This is your Stephen Fry or Jonathan Ross. Everybody bows to this person because when they make the decision, they are powerful. And by the way, they're not always the most senior. The loudest voice, the most powerful influencer isn't always the most senior. So be careful. Look for that characteristic. The monkey, I love the monkey, but the monkey is quite creative. You can sell them the dream. You don't need to give them all the data because once they're on board, they're on board. They're an advocate. It's amazing. And they can go around and they can be an amazing influence if you get them excited. If you get them excited in the boardroom, they can help to be an advocate. But on their own, they're a little dangerous because the wise owl loves the data. Wise owls are often your FDs, your CFOs, but the wise owls like data. They don't listen to the monkey very much. In fact, the monkey distracts them a bit and says, oh God, it's all about the pictures again. Right. What is the evidence? What is the data? How are you showing me your ROI? So we need the wise owl to get the information they need. And this last one is a donkey. The donkey is a little stubborn. They don't like change. They much prefer just everything stays the same. They really are quite negative bias. So they kind of go, my answer is no until you absolutely prove to me that the answer is yes. Now, if we've got a minute, you could just have a little think about those characters that you might have in your boardrooms, in your stakeholders, etc. But then I'm also just going to tell you a few other things to think about. So there are 3 types as well of kind of decision influencers here as well. There's the champion, that is typically you. The champion is really passionate and wants this project to go ahead. That's why you've written the business case. You really are invested in this. You want to do it. And you're often quite tenacious as well. If you get an answer of no, you're going to go back and ask again, etc. But you are the champion. We've then got the budget owner. The budget owner has got to understand all of what the other things are that are coming out of that budget. And they've got a huge amount of conflicting priorities. They don't know yet whether they've got enough money for this. They've got spreadsheets on it, etc. You might also be the budget owner, by the way, but you might have a budget approver above you. So then you've still got to think about that person and think about what their decision criteria is for deciding on where that budget's going to be attributed. And then the third one is you've got an executive sponsor. Okay, so an executive sponsor is somebody who could influence in that boardroom. And I'm going to tell you a cute little story. It worked better when we were all in the offices, and it's harder now, I appreciate, when we are in hybrid and work from home. But back in my corporate days, I had a nice little office. And what I used to do is I used to work late, and I noticed that my CEO, so my boss was an MD, but my CEO would sort of work the floor when they were leaving late at night, and they would go and have a little look at who was in the office working late. And what would happen is they would be quite open to new ideas. And so they would have these nice little sort of off the cuff discussions. And what I discovered is that he would wander into my CEO, would wander into my office, and I would get these boards of visuals and graphics and options and versions and things like that. And I would kind of line them up on my windowsill so they looked a bit like a display, like I was looking at them or something. And I would just inadvertently put them there, but obviously very intentionally. They would wander into my office, they would sit on my chair, not my chair, but the chair opposite my desk. And then they would catch their eye on these little visuals, and they'd go, well, what's all this about? Oh, I like this one, I don't like that one. And I said, oh, well, we haven't, oh, you're not supposed to see these yet. Oh. And I would have a very intentional conversation where essentially I manipulated exactly what their feedback was, so that by the time, and by the way, they were a gorilla, by the time they got into the boardroom, they were already a sponsor of my concepts because they already felt like it was their answer. So, and I was able to share their insights as well with my MD. So my MD knew how to sell it in at the board level. So yeah, think about how you are supporting and engaging and getting excited your executive sponsor. And who is your executive sponsor? I've put together some funding stats for people and culture specifically. So these are all things from Forbes and Gallup and all sorts of fantastic sources that are going to be like, oh, that's an interesting stat. They're just thought starters, really, because there could be a million other things that are going on in your businesses. And then I was just going to leave it with these last couple of links to say, feel free to carry on that conversation with me, Claire. I would love to stay on the line for you and listen to the next bit of that sentence. And if anyone isn't a member already of Work Wonders, then obviously they can join there too.